Jennifer's voice was thin, sharp. It cut through the thick, dusty air of the attic like a shard of glass. Honestly, Marcus, they're just dusty rags. Look at them. We'd be doing him a favor just to throw them out. I was standing at the bottom of the pull-down stairs, one hand on the worn wooden frame. My knuckles were white. I was supposed to be in the kitchen, getting them glasses of water. They always thought I moved slower than I did. It was a common mistake. I heard my son Marcus sigh. It wasn't a sigh of disagreement. It was a sigh of weary agreement. The sound of a man tired of dealing with his father's old things. I know, Jen, but she made them. Mom loved this stuff. Loved, Jennifer said, emphasizing the past tense. She's gone, Marcus. He needs to live in the present. This whole house is a museum to things that are gone, a museum. The word hung there in the silence between them. Dusty rags. I stood there and listened to the sound of my wife's life being dismissed. Sarah's hands had touched every one of those quilts. Her blood was in them, from pricked fingers. Her tears, too, I'm sure. Her laughter was stitched into the seams of the one she made for our first anniversary, the one with the lopsided hearts she always found so funny. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I let the silence stretch. I wanted to see if my son, my only child, would defend his mother. Defend me. He didn't. Okay, he finally said to his wife. Let's just put them in a bag for now. We'll deal with it later. Let's not upset him, not upset him. As if the damage wasn't already done. As if the words hadn't already found their mark, lodging deep in my chest like a splinter of old, cold wood. I turned without a sound. My feet, in their worn slippers, made no noise on the hallway runner. I went back to the kitchen. I opened the tap and filled 2 glasses with water. The sound of the running water was loud in the quiet house. It was a good sound, a clean sound. When I went back to the attic stairs, they were already coming down, batting dust from their designer jeans and expensive shirts. Jennifer gave me a bright, false smile, the kind she used when she wanted something or when she felt she was managing a difficult situation. To her, I was a difficult situation. Oh, there you are, Dad, Marcus said, taking a glass from me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked at the wall over my shoulder. We were just getting a handle on things up there. A lot of junk. I held the other glass out to Jennifer. She took it with perfectly manicured fingers. Thank you, Arthur. It's a real mess up there. You've held on to so much, they're not rags, I said. My voice was quiet, level. It didn't tremble. Jennifer's smile faltered for a second. What was that? The quilts, I said, looking directly at her. I didn't look at Marcus. He had already made his choice. They are not rags, she gave a little, tinkling laugh. A sound meant to dismiss. Oh, Arthur. Of course not. It's just a figure of speech. They're just old. They're fragile. They are not fragile, I said. They're strong. They were made to be strong. I turned and walked back to the kitchen. I placed my own, untouched glass of water in the sink. I could feel their eyes on my back. I heard Jennifer whisper something to Marcus, and he whispered back. Their voices were like the rustling of dry leaves. They left soon after that. They had a dinner reservation. They always had a dinner reservation. They kissed my cheek, their lips dry and quick. A duty performed. We'll be back next weekend to finish up, Dad, Marcus said at the door. We'll get this place cleared out for you. Make it more manageable. As if my life was a cluttered attic that needed to be sorted and discarded by more capable hands. I just nodded. I closed the door behind them and slid the deadbolt home. The click was solid and final. For a long time, I stood in the hallway, listening to the silence of the house. It wasn't empty. It was full of Sarah. Her scent was faint on the armchair in the living room. Her gardening gloves were still on the back porch. Her laughter was in the walls, and her quilts were in the attic. Dusty rags. The words echoed. I didn't feel anger. Not then. What I felt was a profound and sudden clarity. It was as if a fog I hadn't even known I was in had lifted. I saw my son and his wife not as family, but as people. People who looked at my life, the life I had built with my wife, and saw only junk to be managed. I went to my workshop in the garage. The smell of sawdust and old motor oil was a comfort. It was the smell of my own hands, my own work. I brewed a pot of coffee on the old hot plate I kept out there. Strong and black. No sugar, the way my father taught me. As the coffee dripped, I sat on my stool and looked at the tools hanging on the pegboard. Each one had its place. Hammers, wrenches, saws. My father's old hand plane, its wooden handle worn smooth and dark from his sweat and mine. He'd given it to me when I came home from the service. A man needs good tools, he'd said. Not to build a house, to build a life. I had tried to give that plane to Marcus once. He'd looked at it with a polite confusion. What would I do with this, Dad? I can just hire someone. He had missed the point entirely. I drank my coffee from a thick ceramic mug. The heat of it warmed my hands. The bitterness of it sharpened my mind. Jennifer had used a word, museum. She'd meant it as an insult, a place for dead things. But I thought about it. A museum is a place of honor, a place of preservation, a place where stories are told and kept safe, a place where things are seen, truly seen, for what they are, for what they mean. A museum. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug in the utility sink. I went back into the house. I pulled down the attic stairs. The groan of the old springs was a familiar sound. I climbed, my knees complaining, into the dusty, warm darkness. The quilts were in Sarah's old cedar chest, and in two large, sealed bags next to it. I opened the chest first. The scent of cedar and lavender filled the air. Sarah had always put sachets of lavender in with her linens. I lifted the first one out. It was heavy. The weight of it felt good in my hands. This was the migration quilt my own grandmother had started in Mississippi. She carried the unfinished squares with her when she and my grandfather came north to Chicago during the Great Migration. My mother finished it, and Sarah had repaired it, her tiny, neat stitches almost invisible next to my mother's bolder ones. The patches were made from old work shirts, flour sacks, a piece of a dress my grandmother wore on her wedding day. It wasn't a pretty quilt, not in the way Jennifer would understand. Its colors were faded earth tones, browns, deep blues, dusty reds. But it was a map of my family's journey. It was a testament to their hope. It was a story of survival. A rag? This was a holy document. I folded it carefully and laid it on the floor. The next one was the Victory quilt. Sarah made that one while I was in Vietnam. She worked on it every night, she told me in her letters. It was her way of praying me home. It was made of scraps of red, white, and blue. Not bright, parade colors, but muted, somber shades. In the center, she had stitched a small, yellow square. For hope. When I finally came home, we wrapped ourselves in it on the porch swing, and for the first time in over a year, I felt safe. I felt whole. I laid it next to the first. One by one, I took them out. The garden quilt, with its bright, appliqued flowers, each one representing a vegetable or flower from her garden. The Sunday best quilt, made from the dresses she wore to church, the ties I wore, the little jumpers our daughter, who we lost so young, had worn. The family tree quilt, the one she was working on when she got sick. It had a patch from one of Marcus's first baseball uniforms. A scrap of denim from my favorite work jeans. A piece of silk from Jennifer's wedding dress. Sarah had insisted. She's family now, she had said. Her optimism felt like a distant, painful memory. There were 9 quilts in total, each one a chapter of our lives. I sat on the dusty floor of the attic for over an hour, just looking at them. I touched the different textures. The rough denim, the soft flannel, the cool silk. I remembered the stories connected to each piece of fabric. My decision, which had started as a spark of defiance in the workshop, now felt like a sacred duty. This was not about punishing my son. It was not about getting back at his wife. It was about honoring Sarah. It was about placing her work, her life's artistry, where it would be understood. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the phone book. It felt ancient and strange to use it, but I didn't trust the computers Marcus had tried to teach me to use. I found the number I was looking for. Washington, D.C., the National Museum of African American History and Culture. My heart was beating a little faster as I dialed the number. I was transferred twice. I spoke to a polite young woman who listened patiently as I tried to explain what I had. My wife, I said, my voice a little thick. She was an artist, a quilter. Her work tells the story of our family, from the Great Migration to today. It's a history. We do have a textile department, sir, she said. I can connect you to the acquisitions curator, Dr. Sharma's office. I left a message. I gave my name, Arthur Miller, and my number. I described the quilts as best I could. I tried to make my voice sound steady. Important. I didn't want to sound like some old man with a trunk full of dusty rags. I hung up the phone and felt a wave of doubt. What if they weren't interested? What if Jennifer was right? What if they were just old blankets, meaningful only to me? No, I pushed the thought away. I knew what they were. I had held the proof in my own hands. I spent the rest of the day getting the quilts ready. I aired them out on the clothesline in the backyard. The sun was gentle, and a soft breeze made them dance. They looked like banners, flags of a country I had built with my wife. A country of two. That evening, the phone rang. It was an unknown number with a D.C. area code. My hand shook a little as I answered. Mr. Arthur Miller, a woman's voice asked. It was warm and professional. This is Dr. Anya Sharma from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I received your message. You have a collection of quilts. Yes, ma'am, I said. 9 of them, made by my wife, Sarah, and her mother, and her grandmother before her. I could hear the sound of typing in the background. You mentioned the Great Migration? Yes. The first one was started in Mississippi. It has pieces of flour sacks from the sharecropping farm my grandparents worked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A thoughtful silence, not a dismissive one. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice changed, imbued with a new level of interest. That sounds very significant. We have a collection of story quilts, and pieces from that era are particularly important. We talked for almost an hour. I told her about each quilt. I told her about Sarah, about her hands, about her eye for color, about the way she could see a whole story in a scrap of old cloth. Dr. Sharma didn't interrupt. She just listened. She asked questions, smart questions, about the types of fabric, the stitching techniques, the history. Mr. Miller, she said finally, I am very, very interested. Would it be possible for me to come and see them? I'm based in D.C., but I travel for significant acquisitions. My heart swelled. Yes, I said. Yes, that would be fine. I have a trip planned to Chicago in 2 weeks. Would that work for you? 2 weeks. Before Marcus and Jennifer were planning to come back and finish up, it was perfect. That would be perfect, I said. After I hung up, I went to the living room and put on a record. John Coltrane. The sound of his saxophone filled the house. It was a sound full of longing and history and a kind of defiant beauty. I sat in my armchair, the one that still held the faint scent of Sarah's perfume, and I listened. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a sense of purpose. The first voicemail from Marcus came 3 days later. Hey, Dad, just checking in. Jen and I are swamped this week, but we're still on for next Saturday to tackle that garage. Hope you're doing okay. Call me back. His voice was cheerful, oblivious. I listened to the message. Then I pressed the number 7. The automated voice said, "Message deleted." It was a satisfying sound. The next day, another call. "Dad, didn't hear from you. Everything all right? Give me a shout this time." His voice had a slight edge of annoyance. I deleted it. Jennifer texted me. A picture of a salad from some fancy restaurant. "Thinking of you. Hope you're eating well." I looked at the picture of green leaves and strange seeds. It looked like rabbit food. I deleted the text. Their concern was a performance. It was a box they needed to check. Call Dad. Check. It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with their own sense of duty, a duty they found burdensome. I spent the next week preparing, not just for Dr. Sharma's visit, but for myself. I went to the bank. I had a joint account with Marcus, set up years ago just in case. I had my monthly pension deposited there. I went to a teller I knew, a kind woman named Maria, and I opened a new account in my name only. I filled out the forms to have my pension redirected. Closing out the other one, "Mr. Miller?" she asked. "No," I said, "just rearranging things." I left $100 in the joint account, a symbolic amount. Then I called my lawyer, Mr. Clark, a good man. He'd handled our wills after Sarah passed. I made an appointment for the week after Dr. Sharma's visit. It was time to rearrange more than just my finances. The day Dr. Sharma was scheduled to arrive, I was as nervous as a young man on a first date. I had cleaned the house. I had laid all 9 quilts out on mine and Sarah's bed. The king-size bed looked small beneath their collective history. She arrived right on time. She was a small woman, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and hair in a neat bun. She carried a leather satchel. She shook my hand, her grip firm and respectful. "Mr. Miller, it is an honor to meet you," she said. I led her into the bedroom. She stopped at the doorway and drew in a sharp breath. For a moment, she said nothing. She just looked. Her eyes moved over each quilt, taking in the patterns, the colors, the sheer presence of them. "Oh my," she said, her voice soft with awe. "They are magnificent." She opened her satchel and took out a pair of white cotton gloves. She put them on before she took another step into the room. That small gesture, that sign of reverence, meant more to me than any word she could have said. She spent the next 3 hours with the quilts. She examined each one front and back. She took photographs. She had a small magnifying glass she used to look at the stitching. She asked me to tell her the stories again. I sat in the chair by the window, and I talked. I told her about my grandmother's hard hands. I told her about my mother's quiet strength. I told her about Sarah's endless creativity. I told her about the life we had lived, a life chronicled in these pieces of fabric. She listened. She truly listened. She saw. When she finally began to pack up her things, she turned to me, her eyes shining. "Mr. Miller," she said, "these are not just quilts. This is a national treasure. The narrative thread here, from the post-Reconstruction South to the urban North, through the wars and the civil rights era. It's one of the most complete vernacular histories I have ever seen in a single family collection vernacular history." The words felt right. They felt true. We would be deeply, profoundly honored to accept the Sarah Miller collection into the museum's permanent holdings, she said. We would display them with the dignity and context they deserve. Her name would be there. Your family's story would be preserved. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "The museum will handle everything," she continued. "All business now. The packing, the insured transport, the legal donation paperwork. We will make this as easy for you as possible." We shook hands at the door. "Thank you, Dr. Sharma," I managed to say. "Thank you for seeing them. No, Mr. Miller," she said, her kind eyes meeting mine. "Thank you for sharing them." The day the museum's art handlers came was the day before Marcus and Jennifer were due to arrive. The two men were quiet and professional. They wore white gloves, just like Dr. Sharma. They brought special archival boxes and acid-free paper. They treated each quilt as if it were a priceless painting. I watched them work. I watched them lift the migration quilt, the one my grandmother had carried north, and place it gently in its custom box. I watched them pack away the victory quilt, the one that had welcomed me home from a war that had tried to break me. When the last box was sealed and loaded onto the climate control truck, the house felt different. Lighter. The air was clearer. It wasn't an emptiness I felt. It was a sense of completion. Sarah's work was safe. Her story was on its way to its rightful home. That night, my phone rang. It was Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. "Dad, it's Saturday tomorrow. We were planning on coming around 10 to get that garage sorted. Just confirming. Call me back and let me know." I deleted the message. The next morning, I was up early. I made my coffee. I sat in my armchair and read the newspaper. At 10 o'clock sharp, a car pulled into the driveway. Marcus's silver SUV. I didn't get up. I just sat there listening. The doorbell rang. I didn't move. It rang again, a longer, more insistent peal. Then came the sound of a key in the lock. I had forgotten they still had a key. The door opened. "Dad," Marcus called out. "We're here." They walked into the living room. Jennifer was carrying 2 large, empty plastic tubs. For sorting my junk, she stopped when she saw me sitting there. "There you are," she said, her voice bright and strained. "We were getting worried. Didn't you hear the bell?" "I heard it," I said calmly. Marcus looked around. He frowned. "You didn't return my calls, Dad. Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said. "Well, good," Jennifer said, setting the tubs down with a loud clatter. "Then let's get to it. We can start with that attic. I want to get those old blankets bagged up and out of here today." I took a slow sip of my coffee. I set the mug down carefully on the coaster Sarah had crocheted for me years ago. "There's no need," I said. Jennifer sighed, a gust of theatrical impatience. "Arthur, We've been over this. You can't keep everything. It's not healthy. We're just trying to help you. The quilts are gone, I said. They both stared at me. Gone, Marcus repeated. What do you mean, gone? Did you throw them out? He sounded almost hopeful. No, I said. I did not throw them out. I looked from my son's confused face to my daughter-in-law's suspicious one. I donated them, Jennifer laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. Donated them? To who? The Salvation Army? I hope you got a tax receipt. I let the silence hang for a moment. I enjoyed it. Then I looked her right in the eye. I donated the entire collection, I said, my voice clear and steady, to the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. They referred to it as a national treasure. The silence that followed was a different kind. It was a heavy, shocked silence. Jennifer's mouth was slightly open. The fake smile was gone, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. Marcus just stared at me, his face pale. You what? He finally stammered. They're sending the official paperwork this week. I continued, as if discussing the weather. The curator, a Dr. Sharma, was here herself. She was very impressed with Sarah's work. They're calling it the Sarah Miller Collection. Jennifer found her voice first. It was shrill. You're lying. You can't do that. Those are family heirlooms. The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with a knife. I thought they were dusty rags, I said. Her face flushed a dark, ugly red. She knew I had heard her. There was no denying it. Marcus turned on her. What is he talking about, Jen? It was nothing, she snapped, waving a dismissive hand. It was just attic talk. You can't be serious, Arthur. A museum? What do they pay you for them? It was a donation, I said. Their value is not in money. Of course it is, she shot back. Things like that, old handmade things, they could be worth a fortune. You just gave away a fortune. So that was it. It wasn't about family history. It wasn't about sentiment. It was about money. They saw the quilts not as my wife's soul made manifest, but as a potential asset they could liquidate. The quilts are where they belong, I said. They are in a place where they will be honored. This is unbelievable, Marcus said, shaking his head. He was looking at me as if I were a stranger, or as if I had lost my mind, without even talking to me, to us. Dad, we're your family, are you? I asked. It was a genuine question. Family doesn't call a lifetime of love and artistry. Dusty Rags family doesn't stand by silently while their mother's memory is insulted. Family doesn't see a father's life as a mess to be managed. I stood up. I was taller than Jennifer. I was almost as tall as my son. I felt a strength in my bones I hadn't felt in years. I think it's time for you to leave, I said. We're not leaving, Jennifer said, crossing her arms. This is ridiculous. You're being vindictive and senile. Leave, I said again. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of a final command. And leave your key on the table. Marcus looked from me to his wife and back again. He saw something in my eyes he hadn't seen before. Not anger, not weakness, just an ending. Come on, Jen, he said quietly, taking her arm. Let's just go. But Marcus, our tubs, she protested, as if the empty plastic containers were the most important thing in the room. He pulled her toward the door. She looked back at me, her face a mask of fury and resentment. At the door, Marcus hesitated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his keychain. He slid the key to my house off the ring and placed it on the small hall table. It made a small metallic click. Then they were gone. I closed the door. This time, I turned the deadbolt, and I also fastened the security chain. I leaned against the cool wood of the door and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I felt clean, as if a great weight had been lifted. A weight I had been carrying for so long, I had forgotten it was there. The weight of being unseen. The weight of being undervalued. The weight of waiting for my own son to stand up for me. The next week, I went to my appointment with Mr. Clark. I sat in his quiet, leather-scented office. I laid it all out for him. The new bank account. The donation to the museum. The incident with my son and his wife. He listened without judgment, making notes on a yellow legal pad. So, what do you want to do, Arthur? He asked when I was finished. I want to be secure, I said. I want to be independent. And I want to honor my wife's wishes. We spent 2 hours going over everything. We revoked the power of attorney I had given to Marcus. We updated my will. The house, my tools, my savings. I had always intended for them to go to Marcus. But Sarah and I had also supported our local community center, a place that helped kids stay off the streets by teaching them music and art. I changed my will. The bulk of my estate would go to the community center to establish a scholarship in Sarah's name, the Sarah Miller Grant for Young Artists. And what about your son? Mr. Clark asked gently. I thought about it. I thought about the little boy who used to follow me around the garage. I thought about the young man I had been so proud of. I did not want to erase him completely, but he had to understand the consequences of his choices. He will receive my father's hand playing, I said, and my father's watch, the things that carry our family story, the things he never understood the value of. Perhaps one day, he will. Mr. Clark nodded slowly. I see. There was one more thing. My granddaughter, Maya, Marcus and Jennifer's daughter. She was in college, studying to be a teacher. She was a good kid. She had Sarah's eyes. She used to spend hours with me in the workshop when she was little. She called me every Sunday, without fail. She never asked for anything. She just wanted to talk. I set up a trust for her, enough to pay for her education and help her get started in life. She was the one who saw. She was the one who remembered. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt even lighter. The steps I was taking were not born of spite. They were born of love. Love for my wife, love for my granddaughter, and a newfound love and respect for myself. My life was not an estate to be managed. It was a story to be honored, and I was its author. A few weeks later, a large, official-looking package arrived from the museum. It contained the formal deed of gift, legal documents transferring ownership of the quilts. And it contained something else. A preliminary design for the exhibit. It was beautiful. They planned to display 5 of the quilts in a rotating exhibition. The plaque would read, "The Sarah Miller Collection, gift of her husband, Arthur Miller." Below it was a brief history telling the story of my family, of Sarah's artistry. They had even asked for a photograph of her. I sent them my favorite one, of her sitting on the porch swing, laughing, a pile of colorful fabric scraps in her lap. My phone was quiet now. Marcus and Jennifer did not call. They did not text. I imagined they were waiting for me to come to my senses, to apologize, to undo what I had done. They did not understand that I had never been more lucid in my life. One Sunday, Maya called just like always. "Hey, Grandpa," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "How are you doing?" "I'm doing well, sweetheart," I said. "How are your studies?" We talked for a while about her classes, her friends. Then she paused. "Mom and Dad are acting really weird," she said. "They're all quiet and angry. Did something happen?" I decided to tell her. I told her the whole story. About her mother's words in the attic. About my decision. About the museum. She was silent for a long moment when I finished. I was afraid she would be upset, caught in the middle. But when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Oh, Grandpa," she said softly. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Grandma would have loved that so much. She would be so proud." Tears pricked my eyes. "You think so?" "I know so," she said firmly. "Her work in a museum, with her name on it, that's forever. It's the right thing to do. I'm proud of you." Her validation was a balm on a wound I didn't even know was still there. She saw. She understood. The house was too big for me now. It was full of memories, but they were no longer comforting. They felt like echoes in an empty hall. So I made another decision. I called a real estate agent. I sold the house. The house I had brought Sarah home to as a bride. The house where we had raised our children. The house I thought I would die in. It sold in a week. I found a small apartment in a quiet building downtown. It had a balcony that overlooked a park. It was clean and bright and new. I moved in with my armchair, my record player, my father's tools, and my books. Nothing else. I set up a small workbench by the window in the second bedroom. I could sit there and work on small projects, polishing my father's watch, mending a wobbly chair, and look out at the green trees. The quiet didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like peace. 6 months later, I received an invitation in the mail. A formal, cream-colored card. The National Museum of African American History and Culture requested the pleasure of my company at the opening of the new exhibition. Threads of a Nation. The Sarah Miller Collection was the centerpiece. I called Maya. "I have 2 tickets," I said. first-class train tickets to Washington, D.C., and a hotel room with 2 beds, she cried. Walking into that museum, holding my granddaughter's arm, was one of the proudest moments of my life. The building itself was a work of art, a monument to our history, our pain, and our resilience. And there, in a beautifully lit gallery, were Sarah's quilts. They were behind glass, treated with the reverence they deserved. The migration quilt hung on the main wall, its faded colors glowing under the gallery lights. Beside it was the plaque, with Sarah's name in elegant script. And next to that, her smiling face looking out at all the people who had come to see her work. People were gathered around. They were reading the descriptions. They were pointing at the different patches of fabric. They were whispering to each other, their voices full of respect and admiration. "Look at that stitching," one woman said. "It's so precise, can you imagine?" a man said, looking at the migration quilt. "Carrying this all the way from Mississippi." The hope in that, Maya and I stood at the back and just watched. My heart was so full, I thought it might burst. I had done it. I had saved Sarah's legacy from a dusty attic, from dismissive hands, from being forgotten. I had given it to the world. "She's here, isn't she, Grandpa?" Maya whispered, squeezing my arm. I looked at her beautiful face, so much like her grandmother's. "Yes, she is, baby," I said. "She's right here. We stayed for a long time." We looked at every exhibit. We felt the power of our people's history surrounding us. I felt connected to something larger than myself, larger than my own small family drama. I was a part of this story. My family was a part of this story. And now, thanks to Sarah's hands, our chapter was written down, preserved for everyone to see. The next morning, before we took the train home, I received a letter at the hotel. It had been forwarded from my old address. The handwriting on the envelope was Marcus's. I opened it. It was a single page. "Dad," it began, "I don't know how to say this. I've been trying to write this letter for months. What Jennifer said was wrong. What I did, by saying nothing, was worse. I was a coward. I was a bad son. I took you for granted. I took Mom's memory for granted. I saw her quilts as a burden, a problem to be solved, because that's easier than feeling the grief of her being gone. That's no excuse. It's just the truth. I heard you sold the house. I heard about the will. I'm not angry. I am ashamed. I understand. You did what you had to do. I don't know if you can forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I am sorry. I am truly sorry. And I am proud of what you did for Mom. It was the right thing. Your son, Marcus." I read the letter twice. I folded it and put it in my coat pocket. Maya saw me from across the room. "Who's that from?" "Your father," I said. Is it good?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I looked out the hotel window at the Washington Monument, a proud, straight spine against the morning sky. I thought about my son. I thought about his silence in the hallway. I thought about his key clicking on the table. And I thought about his words on the page. An apology is not a key. It doesn't unlock a door that has been closed. It is simply a knock, a quiet request to be heard. "It's a start," I said to my granddaughter. "It's a start." I didn't know if I would answer the letter. Not yet. Forgiveness is a slow, quiet thing. Like a quilt, it is pieced together one small stitch at a time. For now, it was enough to know that he had finally seen. I sat in my clean, quiet apartment, in my familiar armchair. The sun streamed through the window. I had a cup of strong, black coffee. I had a John Coltrane record playing softly on the turntable. My life was not large or grand, but it was my own. It was whole, and it was finally at peace. The quilts were where they belonged, and so was I.